Alright guys, this is the video that so many of you have been waiting for and requesting ever since I got my 2022 Subaru BRZ. We are going to compare the new BRZ, the ND2 Miata Club, and the Honda S2000 Club Racer. We're going to talk about how they perform, overall ride comfort and daily drivability, but most importantly, I just want to convey to you guys what it feels like to drive these three sports cars on a back road. So first things first, this is a 2022 Subaru BRZ. I've just put over 2,300 miles on it, and I'm driving it first because, believe it or not, this is the car I'm most comfortable with now. Despite having owned 3 S2000s over the years and having driven probably 20 or 30, my last 2 track days and 2,300 miles were done in this car, so I feel the most comfortable in this car. It is a limited model, so it has the Alcantara interior, it has a few driving aids, it has the 18-inch wheels with the Pilot Sport 4 tires. I just swapped on last night a set of beater 17-inch Enki wheels with some Champiro SX2 tires. Not that different from the Pilot Sport 4s, honestly, in terms of outright grip, so this will still be a pretty good representation of a stock BRZ. All right, so let's talk about how this thing handles a back road. Right away, you hear that fake engine noise being piped in to the cabin from the speakers. A 228 horsepower from this 2.4 liter boxer 4-cylinder. Dyno results have shown that the new BRZ/GR86 makes about 40 wheel horsepower more than its predecessor. I think this car is closer to 240 brake horsepower, whereas the old model is probably more like 190 to 195 brake horsepower. So it's quite a drastic difference, and you feel that when you put your right foot down. This thing pulls, and it makes great torque in the mid-range. The infamous torque dip at 4,000 RPMs is pretty much gone. I mean, look at this. It's a pretty quick car now, and I could not say the same for the old model. So this car does come standard with a limited slip differential. There's only one brake option for this car as of now, since there is no performance pack. But the stock brakes with just some pads and fluid actually do a pretty good job. Super direct steering, despite being an electric power rack. Super easy to heel toe. The rev hang issue that I mentioned in one of my previous videos is virtually non-existent when you actually start pushing the car a little bit harder. And you get the rear end to step out so easily, and it's so controllable and so progressive. This car has a relatively long wheelbase, so it's very easy to manipulate that angle of counter steer. And look at that. This car now has enough power to play around with that back end at will, even with these summer tires. Now the old FRS/BRZ/GT86 came with some all-season Michelin Primacy tires, and a lot of reviewers at the time said that the tire was well matched to the car because the car has so little power, it really needs a less grippy tire in order for you to play with that back end. Now, even with the Pilot Sport 4s or these Champiro SX2s, the power level is still matched to the tire. That's a sick NSX. Guess what t-shirt I'm wearing. Anyways, as I was saying, this car is so well balanced from the factory. Just the right amount of power, just the right amount of weight, just the right amount of grip. This car is just so excellent in so many ways, and the fact that you can get it for around 30 grand, I mean, it speaks for itself in terms of pure driving enjoyment. As I mentioned, I've already tracked this car twice, and I'm tracking it again this Saturday at Sonoma Raceway, and I'm just so happy with how the car performs already. You know, the big downside for me for track driving is that the stock alignment is not very aggressive. It has well under 1 degree of front camber. So the front end tends to push, and because it is a McPherson strut front suspension, you don't get additional negative camber as you load up those front tires in a corner. So as a result, you actually have to install coilovers and camber plates to get a ton of static camber at the front, like anywhere from 3.5 to 4, maybe even 4.5 degrees. Whereas in something with a double wishbone setup like the S2000, you can run less static camber, because when you load up those front tires in a corner, you get more dynamic negative camber. So a -3 static might actually end up being a -4 or 4.5. So that is the 2022 Subaru BRZ on a canyon road. Let's hop into the ND2 Miata Club and see how it compares. Okay, so now we are in a 2019 Mazda ND2 Miata. This is the RF model with a retractable fastback. I have chosen to drive this thing with the top down, obviously, to get that full roadster experience, but hopefully you guys can still hear me. Even with this RF model being about 100+ pounds heavier than the soft top version, this car still weighs in at just over 2,400 pounds, which is 300 to 400 pounds lighter than either the BRZ or the S2000 CR. This car makes 181 horsepower from its 2-liter Skyactiv inline-4. So it's way down on power compared to the other two, but it also is so much lighter, so the power to weight ratio actually isn't that far off. And since this is a club package, it does have the limited slip diff, Brembo brakes, BBS wheels, and the Bilstein dampers. If you get an ND2 Miata to drive spiritedly or on a racetrack, absolutely you should get the club package. It is worth every penny. So with that out of the way, let's see how this drives compared to the BRZ. This car does have an aftermarket exhaust, but that is the only modification. And we have some Michelin PS4S tires. This car is just so much more eager to turn in than the BRZ because it's so much lighter. Level of nimbleness can't be matched. Lightweight just counts for too much in a sports car. Love that throttle response. I prefer the sound that this engine makes over the BRZs just slightly. That might be due to the exhaust, but at least with the top down, it just sounds so good. Revs out to 7,500 RPM. It's a pretty zingy little motor. It doesn't make nearly as much mid-range torque as the BRZ. And so on these straightaways, you do have to try a little bit harder to keep the engine in its power band. This is a fantastic little car, even in stock form. It's so nimble, it's so lightweight. And even with the uprated Bilstein dampers, the suspension setup in this car is still very soft and a bit floaty in the corners. But actually, comparing this to the stock 2022 BRZ, both cars have very soft suspension, so they're very similar in that regard. Yeah, the straight line performance is good, it's adequate. I don't think this car necessarily needs more power, but the BRZ definitely feels more potent in a straight line. And because of the BRZ's extra torque, coming out of corners, it does feel more playful than this Miata. This Miata seems like it prefers to grip. The steering is so nice and light. The shifter is so direct. The shifter is easily better than the BRZ shifter. See, the back end will wiggle on you, but it's not quite as playful as the BRZ. The BRZ, I think the longer wheelbase combined with the extra torque really give that car a playfulness that even the ND2 Miata doesn't quite have. This is a car that you can enjoy at the limit or even far below the limit. When you're driving below the limit, the ND2 Miata is even more fun than the BRZ because you really feel that lightweight and the fact that you can put the top down. I mean, these are simple things that are obvious. You can read them on a spec sheet, but in reality, they do make a difference. Now, the thing with the ND2 Miata is that it is ultimately a different car than the BRZ in the sense that it's a two-seater, it's very small, there's very limited luggage space. This is not a car that most people would be able to daily drive. Whereas the BRZ, it's got a back seat, it's got a big trunk, you can fold the back seat down for more space. But on a back road, driving at 7/10, this Miata puts a bigger smile on my face. Excellent brakes. These Brembos really do a great job. Now, I wish the upgraded Bilstein dampers actually came with a different spring rate, a firmer spring rate, and a slightly lower ride height. I think that would really help make this car feel just a little bit more responsive in the corners. I will say these seats, they don't hold a candle to the stock BRZ seats. There's way less side bolster in here, especially for your thighs, and so you find yourself trying to hold on in the corner. The BRZ seats really do a much better job, and I think I probably won't even need to upgrade them for the track. The other thing is I'm sitting about an inch too high in this seat, and I think I have it as low as it'll go. But as I said, my overall impressions with this car, it's more fun for sure in the canyons when you're driving at 6 to 7/10. On a track, that remains to be seen. I will be tracking an ND2 very soon. The last thing to do here is hop in that CR and see how the S2000 does. All right, guys, last but not least, the Honda S2000 AP2 CR or Club Racer. You guys already know about this car, who am I kidding, but I'll just go through the specs real quick. What is the difference between a CR and a base model AP2? This has the hardtop, front spoiler, rear wing. It has uprated springs and dampers, a quicker steering ratio than the AP2. I believe it's the same as the AP1. It has Alcantara seats and interior, and overall it is just a more hardcore version of the S2000. You can think of this as sort of like a Type S if you know your JDM S2000s. So 2.2 liter F22C motor, naturally aspirated, inline 4, makes 240 horsepower. Now it's worth reminding you guys that between the three cars we have here today, they're very, very similar on paper. All have naturally aspirated high revving 4-cylinder engines. They all have 6-speed manual transmissions with a limited slip diff. They're all rear-wheel drive, fairly lightweight, the Miata being 2,400 pounds and the S2000 BRZ being around 2,800 pounds. In today's market, you can find clean examples of each of these for around $30,000. Now, what that means is brand new BRZ, brand new ND2, or you can find a clean AP2 S2000, albeit probably not a CR, for around $30K as well. With that out of the way, let us take the S2000 for a drive. E-Tech, baby. This has the best engine and gearbox combo out of the three cars today, hands down. Now, I know that BRZ makes more torque, a lot more torque actually, but when you're driving spiritedly, revving the engine all the way out to 8,200 RPM, the lack of torque really isn't super important. This gearbox is just far superior to anything else I've driven. It's so mechanical. And again, it's paired so well with this high revving engine. Excuse the silence, I'm just having an absolute blast right now driving this thing. CR suspension doing a great job keeping the car nice and controlled in the corners. This car feels less floaty in the corners than either the BRZ or the ND2 Club. This car just feels altogether more serious than either of those two. Just on engine noise alone, this car, it wins my heart every time, man. Listen to that. Perfect downshift. Attack this right-hand corner. Now the controls in this car are so much heavier than either the BRZ or ND2's controls. The steering has a lot more weight to it. I never thought an S2000 shifter was particularly stiff, but those other two cars are just so lightweight, light to the touch. Too much fun. Plenty of mid-corner grip here. We're only on a Bridgestone S04 pole position, which is definitely not as grippy as a Pilot Sport 4S, but still doing a good job out here in the canyons. A little bit of understeer there. Oh my goodness, this car is so good, so good. S2000 CR, this is where it's at, baby. Oh, I need to calm down, get some air going here. Woo! All right, so let me try to collect my thoughts and break it down for you guys, this three-way comparison we have here. I'll be as methodical as possible here. So let's start with simple things. Steering feel. They're actually all very close. They're all electric power steering racks. They've all done a great job at maintaining steering feedback and weight and having the right steering ratio. I would have to give the steering to the ND2. The BRZ and the CR S2000 steering are very, very different because there's such a difference in the weight. But I would give them overall a tie for second in terms of overall feel. Now, if you like lighter steering, the BRZ is for you. If you like a heavier steering rack, the S2000 is going to be the one. In terms of gearbox, it is not even a comparison. The S2000, it's more mechanical. It's got a nice snickety-snick short throw. It is the best shifter I've used in any stock car, hands down. Between the ND2 and the BRZ, the ND2 actually wins because it feels closer to an S2000 shifter. This is the gold standard. The closer you can get a shifter to feel like this, the better you are. And the ND2 just has a more mechanical feel to it. BRZ's shifter is still very good, but it has a little bit of vagueness, a little bit of rubberiness. Compared to almost anything else out there on the market, BRZ shifter is great, but it just doesn't hold a candle to the ND2 or the CR. Now, in terms of engine, this one is a little bit harder to say because it really depends on what you're looking for. If you like mid-range torque, the BRZ has the most of it, and it is the easiest to drive on a daily basis as a result of that torque. Now, if you like that high-pitched, high-strung feeling to the engine, obviously this AP2 S2000 is where it's at. Even though the AP1 S2000 revs even higher, this AP2 is still by far the most motorsport-feeling, high-revving engine out of these three. The ND2 Miata, I would say, comes second if you like that high-revving nature. It only revs to 7,500, which is only 100 RPM higher than the BRZ's, but it still feels like it rewards you more for winding out because of the relative lack of mid-range torque. But for my driving style, for a sports car, especially a car that I would track, S2000 number one, ND2 and BRZ tied for second. Now, in terms of chassis, and I'm just going to lump all of the chassis components into one sort of ranking here, at 7 to 8 tenths, the BRZ is the most fun because it has the longest wheelbase and the most mid-range torque. Getting the car to oversteer is just a matter of giving it a little bit too much throttle on corner exit, and the rear end comes right around. It's the easiest to control. If you prefer a car that's more just razor sharp in its response, the ND2 and S2000 CR are definitely superior. Now, between the S2000 and the ND2, that's a lot harder. I think the ND2 is more fun to drive below the limit. At the limit, I'll reserve judgment until I've tracked one, which should be happening relatively soon. What's my overall rankings for these cars? Well, let's also factor in daily drivability. BRZ is the most daily drivable car of the three, by far. S2000 is the least daily drivable, by far. It's the stiffest, it's the loudest. What are you doing? You're interrupting my video. The ND2 sits somewhere right in between, but if you need storage space, the BRZ is the best by far. Now, if this was a second car decision, S2000 would still be my #1 pick. Between the ND2 and BRZ, it's a lot closer, but I think the playfulness of the BRZ's chassis and the overall look of the car, I know that's very subjective, but I prefer how the BRZ looks and feels when you're just trying to have fun, not necessarily chasing lap times. So there it is, S2000 CR, unsurprisingly, #1, BRZ #2, ND2, a very, very close third, but you really can't go wrong with any of these cars. They're all fantastic sports cars. We should be grateful that they're still being made. I mean, obviously the S2000 isn't, but the other two, fantastic that they can even get this close to the S2000, that they can even be mentioned in the same conversation as an S2000 is something to be celebrated. So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope this answers all of the questions that you have in terms of how these cars compare. If you have any more questions, let me know in the comments. I'll do my best to respond. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, subscribe if you have not already, and I'll see you next time.